This video will be about the new GoPro Hero 10, which on the surface is basically the same as the old Hero 9, but has some interesting differences which I was surprised by. If I power them up, you'll see the first thing that you might notice is the 10 powers up faster, which for an action camera, I think that's actually a very valuable feature. And the other thing which any Hero 9 user will instantly notice is the speed of navigation, the menus. The touchscreen is much better thanks to the new GP2 processor. Actually using the camera is a much nicer experience compared to the 9, which feels, well, a nice way to put it would be clunky.
Nope. 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 Nope.
Now, a nice thing is that they are identical bodies. The lens is the same, you can use all of your old NDs with it. The battery is the same, the card slot's the same. Sort of fit in all of your old cases and accessories, and you don't have to change anything if you're moving from a Hero 9. I got the 10 because I wanted to have two GoPros for redundancy. I wasn't really sure if there'd be that much of a difference for most of my uses. One of the first things I noticed when I did my first tests was that the colors on the 10 are a bit different to the 9. Even on the flat color profile, they're more saturated. Honestly, it looks better straight out the camera, but it seems to have about the same amount of flexibility working with it in post. And it's still 8-bit, so you can't push the colors too hard. That's one thing I would love for GoPro to do when they update their sensor, maybe make it 10-bit. An interesting thing to note is that it's the exact same sensor in the two cameras. The only thing that's changed really is the processor. The Hero 9 has a GP1 processor, the Hero 10 has a GP2, which they say is much faster, and this also allows them to get better frame rates out of the sensor. There's now a 5.3K 4x3 mode, which is fantastic, and that's mostly what I've been shooting in. There's also a 5.3K 50 frames a second mode, which is very cool for slow motion, but it's only 16:9. Then there's the 4K 4x3 mode, which I love, which now can do 50 frames a second. So that's great for slow-mo flying. Then there's the 4K 16:9 mode, which now can do 100 frames a second, which is kind of insane. Now, one of my biggest concerns with the 10 is that they haven't upped the bitrate at all from the 9. So the 9, if you shoot in the high bitrate mode, it's 100 megabit a second. For me, that became very noticeable when you would step up the frame rates on the Hero 9. You'd start losing a lot of detail. Things like trees and leaves would get mushy, and it just would start to not look good at all. So I was worried that the 10, by increasing resolution and frame rate while not increasing the bitrate, that it was going to have problems actually encoding all of this information with its 100 megabit codec. Now, I was surprised to find that it actually does look a lot better. So comparing 4K 100 frames on the Hero 10 with 2.7K 100 frames on the Hero 9, you really notice that extra resolution and detail. And the codec doesn't seem to be hurting it too much. But as it turns out, you can push that even further, which is GoPro's custom Labs firmware, which adds some experimental features to the camera that they might not add to the official releases. They recently added support for the Hero 10, and one thing they added, which is kind of insane, is the ability to set custom bit rates. While the Hero 10 only supports 100 bitrate by default, you can use the Labs firmware and set a custom bitrate of whatever you want. Now, obviously the downside here is you're going to need fast cards if you want to go higher bitrate. So I looked into getting a V60 card, bought the Angelbird 128 gig, and with that I've been able to easily record at 200 megabit with the various frame rates. And just having that extra quality is so good in my opinion, and it's really made the difference with this camera for me. Because now you have those extra resolutions and frame rates, but you also have the ability to up your bitrate when you need it. For most people, you hit record on your GoPro, you don't really care if the tree in the background is like a little bit blurry, but for anyone wanting to get the most out of their camera, I would highly recommend looking into this. How you change your settings is with an app called QR Control. So you download this app to your phone, and then you can input any settings, and it basically creates a string which generates a QR code. And then you scan that QR code with your camera, and it will update the settings that you chose. And the last thing I want to talk about is stabilization. With the 10, GoPro has updated their Hypersmooth feature. So over the years, this technology has come a long way, and it's kind of insane how well they can stabilize the camera now. However, it still can't stabilize as well as post-stabilization software like RealSteady. Now, this isn't really a criticism on GoPro because this is really a limitation of how well you can stabilize in real time. The huge advantage that RealSteady has for stabilization is that it can literally see the future. So it knows that in 2 seconds you're going to be turning a corner, and so it'll basically ease that turn so it slowly eases into the corner, and that's what it does in post. Whereas a GoPro is recording in real time, it can't stabilize that sudden turn, it can only slow it down a little bit. Hypersmooth is definitely improved, and I think it's pretty usable for most things, and for most people, it'll be fine. I managed to test out RealSteady outputs at 100 and 200 megabit a second, and it definitely helps a lot with the pipeline and just keeping that quality as high as I can until the final output. Especially if I'm recording in higher bit rates on the camera, I don't want to throw all that information away immediately when I stabilize, then there was kind of no point to the exercise at all. So in conclusion, the 10 is quite a minor upgrade on the 9, but they really improved all of the areas that matter most to me and to getting the most quality out of the GoPro. So it's a more significant upgrade than I first thought, but it's probably only worth it to people who really want those better frame rates and resolutions. That being said, the 9 is fine for most people, and I'll still definitely use it from time to time. Realistically, the final result will be pretty much the same most of the time. So if anyone else has been using the GoPro Labs firmware, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. It seems pretty cool to me. So that's it from me. Combined with an FPV drone, I can't wait to see what people actually make with this camera.